Hey, it's Mike here, and today my response to Dr. Mike Israetel from Renaissance Periodization, a YouTube channel that has nearly 4 million subscribers, responding to ex-vegan Maddie Limburner or MadFit's workouts and whether or not they are effective, but spends half of the video, no joke, talking about veganism.
And that's a good thing because the vegan diet is a morally superior diet, period. I think in the end, the vegans win.
He talks about how vegans are more ethical and how they're on the right side of history, but then goes off into some interesting sort of ethical farming points, as well as making some health-related points about a vegan diet. And just whenever these YouTubers talk about veganism and plant-based diets and the difference and all these details, I just feel like I need to chime in. I just find it really interesting. And this one is especially not black and white. He makes some points that I agree with and some points that I absolutely do not agree with.
You want to consider going vegan. It's not going to improve your health because there's no health difference between vegan and omnivorous diets if you factor in like everyone's eating healthy food and controlling the intake of excessive calories.
He even sort of points to ChatGPT as a way to solve vegan nutritional issues, which is one I haven't heard before. Anyway, we're going to cover all of that, so let's just go to the Renaissance. And what the heck does that even mean, Renaissance periodization? You would think it's some history channel or something, but no, he's talking about the Renaissance period being a period in which knowledge was flourishing, and then trying to apply that sort of as a pun to periodization, which is an athletic term where you're breaking down things into different periods, sort of like the bulking period or the cutting period.
I am a former professor of exercise and sport science. As a matter of fact, I have a PhD in sport physiology, a jiu-jitsu black belt, and I bodybuild and lift weights and work out. And so does MadFit, Insane Fit, a young woman who's helping other folks get in shape with her own mega massive YouTube channel.
And then we have the situation with Maddie Limburner, who isn't really that much of the video that I'm gonna respond to, but he gets on this topic because he briefly covers Maddie's ex-vegan video, her Instagram video where she's like, hey guys, I'm not vegan anymore, I just blah, blah, blah.
I decided to include a very small amount of animal products into my diet because I wasn't feeling my best. I'm still pretty much plant-based.
But I sort of get the drift that he either doesn't realize that this was 5 years ago or is looking at a larger time scale here, because it's been a long time since this came out. I responded to her about that. Anyway, if you're like the 500,000 people that clicked on Dr. Mike's video, you might be wondering, what did he have to critique about MadFit? And to sum it up, he's basically saying, if you want to look like her, you're going to have to lift the weights that she has in the background and not just be doing mat work. In other words, that she's not just mat fit. Oh, that was a really bad pun.
And so basically, yeah, you want to train to look like her. You can do this for a few weeks, and then once you're in better shape, you see those dumbbells next to her, you're gonna be getting them and you're gonna get off the ground. You're gonna walk around, you're gonna do lunges, you're gonna do squats, you're gonna do presses, you're gonna do rows, and really challenge yourself, really push the pace, because that's kind of the only way that you can have results that look like that.
But now we get into the topic of diet, and he talks about how Maddie says she's still eating a more or less plant-based diet, and he sort of has an issue with the general nature of that term.
When a diet is based in or on plants, that in typical understanding of human language seems to me not to say that it is bereft of everything else. Like when you say the Asian peoples have a rice-based diet, which they do, it is not that you're saying they eat only rice, because they don't.
And yeah, I did an entire video years back about plant-based versus vegan, and it's why my name is Mike the Vegan and not Mike the plant-based person. Like, it's just too wide open. I prefer the term 100% plant-based or fully plant-based. And he says, you know, perhaps this is because veganism just has a bad rap.
What you really want to say is vegan diet. I know it's a sales tactic. You say, oh, plant-based, because people like typically associate, unfortunately, vegans with, no offense, fellas, no offense, statistical accuracy, psychotic socialists that hate you and will throw things at you and they'll spill red ink on you and you wear fur.
And I would add that, yes, we are getting more and more studies talking about how people really don't like veganism to the point where, vegans are discriminated against. I know it's kind of ridiculous to say, but it is just objectively the case from the science. Like from this study, the only group that vegans are viewed worse than is drug addicts. There's a pretty big gap there, but it's just worth mentioning. I think this just has a lot to do with the backfire effect and how vegans make people that aren't vegan feel bad just by existing and by telling them to be vegan, in the same way that environmentalists make certain people feel bad. It's because of what they are doing and the other person's not doing. That's my take.
Almost all diets are plant-based, you guys. Most human calories come from plants and not from animals, as consumed. With all the best vegan intentions in mind, to be obfuscatory to the idea that it's really just the vegan diet, which is what it actually is.
So yeah, he thinks that the term plant-based is a bit of a sales tactic that is more palatable, which is exactly what companies are doing because they don't really have another term that they can use and get as many sales. But I don't think it's like deeply dishonest. I think most people understand what it means. I mean, language is fluid. Like if you say I'm on a plant-based diet and people know what you mean, I just don't think that's the biggest issue in the world. And a lot of it, yeah, is semantics. And this reminds me of something that I'm probably going to cover soon, of how milk in the past in medieval times also included almond milk. Yes, I was reading through a medieval recipe and it said substitute with almond milk, and I actually thought that somebody had put that in there as a joke. But no, back then milk could literally mean directly from an animal or even from some almonds. And so plant-based, people can interpret as fully plant-based or not fully plant-based. It's a little bit of a problem, but not the biggest one. Yeah, maybe we need some better terms. But then again, we also have a bunch of confusion about Paul Saladino and his animal-based melon like a year ago, which was ridiculous.
This is how to make watermelon sorbet with only 3 ingredients. And it's completely animal-based. Watermelon, honey, and lime.
Animal-based melon.
So now watermelon, lime, and let's not forget spaghetti squash.
And look at that. It's like animal-based spaghetti right there.
Are all animal-based.
And that kind of exposes the semantic issue here, where saying something is based on something can mean anything else is in it. So it's an animal-based diet, but he could be having Coca-Cola or animal-based melon. Any of that. I don't know why that just doesn't get unfunny to me.
I'm not gonna call it plant-based. I'm gonna call it vegan. You know why? Because it's vegan. And that's a good thing, because the vegan diet is a morally superior diet, period. And I don't mean to take the sales out of the vegans who are, in the long term of history, are going to be judged as just more ethical than the rest of us and really more forward-thinking and kinder. I think in the end, the vegans win.
So yeah, he just called a vegan diet a morally superior diet. And why does he even think this? Well, he mentions the just industrial slaughter of animals.
And they're coming almost always from the best possible place. I mean, like, industrial slaughter of animals is really fucked up.
But this is where I want to explore his ethics a bit more, because he gets into what he really uses as an excuse, and that is ethical animal farming. That makes it okay to consume animals and how they would suffer in nature anyway. Here he is.
If you can have a situation where you're raising similar animals, and instead of 10-year average lifespan, every animal you slaughter has to be at least 15 years old or something like that, or whatever the analog is here. And so it's outliving its natural comparator group on average by a long shot. And also it's inoculated against any kind of diseases that we know. It gets antibiotics and all that good stuff. At the same time, they're completely protected from predation. Then and they're allowed to roam in a very huge enclosure and socialize with their animal friends and their families. Then all of a sudden it's kind of like, yeah, they're actually having a better time in captivity. And then when you consume their animal parts later, you're really kind of like not doing anything that seems ethically off limits for animals.
So my first problem here is just the math. These animals under no capitalist ethical farming system live longer than they would in nature on average. We're talking about cows, for example, generally slaughtered at around 2 years. Maybe if they're grass-fed and slower, it can be a little bit longer, but bovines in the wild generally live between 18 and 25 years, so that's not cutting it. And we have bred modern cows or cattle from the aurochs. That was a long time ago, but to look at a sort of more modern, potentially wild animal, bison, can even live up to 30 years in the wild. So no, when they're on the bison meat farms, they're just killed as soon as they are fat enough to slaughter and be profitable. And I have yet to hear an ethical farmer advertise their farming style as letting live animals past their point of slaughter just to give them a little bit more time. I have not seen that one. I did meet one dairy farmer who said, hey, I let my old cows sort of live their life out for a bit instead of just killing them like conventional farming, but that same one just takes the male calves away and gives them to the 4-H beef program. So I could be wrong, but it seems to me like he's starting to see, okay, this is more ethical for various reasons to be vegan, but then maybe he hasn't done the hard look at the whole animal agriculture industry, even the ones that claim to be humane. You can watch Dominion if you want to see how horrible things are in certified humane situations, but I'll bet you $100 you won't sit through it. That's not an official bet. Also have to mention at the end of that, he said, you're not doing anything that ethically wouldn't be okay by an animal or an animal wouldn't do. And
Not doing anything that seems ethically off limits for animals.
it's like, you can't put your ethics, you can't appeal to nature to the point of like appealing to animal ethics. That is absolutely ridiculous just in terms of everything that animals do. Like ducks are just by default grapists. Like their male genitalia has evolved to be a spiral, and then the female genitalia has evolved to be a crazy, weird little labyrinth in order to have more control over the reproduction. Like we don't need to go by those ethics. You get the point.
Older and way older than they'd be in the wild, and they're very humanely put down, and all is great. I think that's totally fine. But on the vegan side, there's this huge advantage of like, dude, killing other things for food is kind of fucked, and it kind of is. And so then it's time to get into basically the kind of farming practices and consuming animal products from the kinds of producers that follow very ethical practices.
We have things like humane certified and various claims like free range, pasture raised, blah de blah, that have horrible regulation, if not no regulation at all. It's important to note that from Michigan State's Law Journal, terms like humanely raised don't have a universal definition and rely on a letter from the producer being like, trust me, bro, to the USDA, and the USDA is like, okay. This brings me to a recent Fairlife scandal, that dairy company who claim that their suppliers share Fairlife's commitment to well cared for cows. Well, investigators have found systemic, widespread, egregious animal cruelty, cruel standard practice, extreme neglect, including at the hands of and with the awareness of management.
Kind of no matter where you live, you're gonna be able to find some ethically sourced animal products, eat them to the whatever minimum that you need to feel your best, eat as many plants as possible to feel the difference. That's probably the way to go.
But yeah, it's just not the case that everywhere you live, you're gonna be able to find your standard of ethical animal agriculture as well. Like I would say, yeah, most places you are, somebody will sell you something that they claim to be humane, but my guess is if you went there, you'd be like, I don't know about this. And especially if you followed the animals to the slaughterhouse, you'd be like, I definitely don't know about this. And that's the crux of the situation. When you aren't vegan, you have to come up with these explanations like, oh no, it's ethical, I swear, but you're not actually examining it. But then if you actually go vegan, you can take those meat goggles off and actually see the industry for what it is, even if it's claiming to be humane. And now I can just hop into the health topic here in general with the first point he's making is if you're failing on a vegan diet, just ask ChatGPT.
Here's the thing for folks that need to consume animal products, but they're ethically vegan, but their health isn't allowing them. Definitely, of course, number one is try to make sure you check all of your supplementation boxes, more protein, more B vitamins, and any talk with ChatGPT will tell you exactly what more you need to be having. If that's not working, then the next thing you can address is absorption issues. Sometimes you think you're eating enough of something, but it's getting absorbed at a fifth of what normal people, you're totally normal. The average person can absorb, and so you just need to eat a lot more of it. Sometimes that helps.
So there's points I disagree with and agree with him here. Yes, I do think that there are some supplement blind spots for people, or just dietary blind spots for certain people. And then also that absorption can be an issue. We have not that much data on this. This is a bit more speculative in my opinion. And that's why it's good to get levels checked, and also why instead of asking ChatGPT, it's good to go talk to a nutritional professional. And that is where, once again, you can just say, well, what if somebody doesn't have the money to do that? And that's where I have to just say, I guess asking the internet about supplementation is better than just not supplementing at all. But this is why I would love to see somebody create like a fund for people who are on a vegan diet and they have a nutritional concern, and instead of just giving up, they could perhaps be supported to even just have some telehealth appointment with some nutrition professional who can maybe order some labs, which would be paid for ideally. I mean, we're talking about like a whole nother healthcare insurance being built to try and keep people vegan. But as we've seen before, people have just had a hunch that their iron was low, not checked it, and quit, when in reality, maybe it wasn't low, and maybe there was just something else they could have easily done. I should just mention that a recent study did find that vegans trended about 30% higher for their ferritin or iron store levels, which is amazing. And then he says another interesting thing, that if you want to go vegan, you're just probably not going to be healthier for it. It's not like an advantage.
But for most people, I will say, if you're not particularly attached to the idea of eating meat and you want to consider going vegan, it's not going to improve your health because there's no health difference between vegan and omnivorous diets.
And this is where it's like, I get he's a doctor, but he's not citing any sources. His source here is Trust Me Bro, which you know I do not like that source. It's not peer reviewed. But we just have study after study showing that vegans are healthier, including 15% lower cancer rates, lower diabetes risk, averaging normal BMI, unlike other dietary groups, and on. But he might explain that away a little bit by saying, healthy user bias. He doesn't use that term, but that's more or less what he's explaining.
No health difference between vegan and omnivorous diets if you factor in like everyone's eating healthy food and controlling the intake of excessive calories.
And I think this is a bit of a hard one to parse out of like how healthy and health-minded is your average vegan. Well, veganism is an ethical stance, something I probably should have mentioned in the plant-based versus vegan conversation. But yeah, so that doesn't mean that somebody who's vegan has to be eating a healthy diet. But what we do see is on average that people on a vegan diet are consuming significantly more fiber, regardless of their intention for why they ended up eating a vegan diet, whether it's just a non-ethical, fully plant-based diet or an ethical vegan diet. Or in the case of the Adventists, we have a lot of studies on a religiously vegan diet. You could say, gray area with ethics there. And a lot of these studies do control for healthy lifestyle factors. And it's also unfair to say these people may be eating healthier, so we just got to throw that data away. That doesn't actually count, especially adjusting for things that are more innate in a vegan diet, like fiber consumption or the BMI, because they're eating a higher fiber content, because they're eating more plants, so that they're eating more bulk in the form of that fiber and even a little bit more water, being more satiated, consuming less calories, and that is a direct result of a vegan diet. Now, and this lower BMI that we see in vegans is unfortunately often adjusted away. We see it in some of these bone fracture studies. We see it in some other health studies as well. So you're taking a diet that causes people to be a lower BMI and then taking the health benefit that we actually see and adjusting it backwards because their BMI is lower. You can see it's sort of begging the question of their health status, saying they are less healthy because they're healthy. Like, I'm getting kind of convoluted here.
But it's just as healthy, and if you supplement properly and you keep track of your health, it is definitely awesome to be in a world where you're not contributing to animal suffering at all.
But I will say, I'm happy that he admits that it's at least as healthy, because the bar is generally way less healthy. It's the worst diet ever. Joe Rogan and other podcasters, which I will say he's self-aware enough to go, hey, I'm not like those other guys. Here he is.
Scott, if I was like more of a manosphere guy and a carnivore dude, I could have really interpreted this video totally differently, huh? See what I'm talking about, man? This is the feminization of our society, brother. First, they want us to turn vegan so our hair falls out. Then they want us to drive Priuses. Scott, what else can we say? What's next? The globalists. Down the drain we go.
And I think a study that did a good job of taking into account healthy user bias was the Stanford twin experiment. Of course, taking twins, randomizing them to either a healthier vegan diet or a healthier omnivorous diet with way more vegetables, all of them less sugar than normal. And the results were a lot of benefits, including what I find to be the most fascinating: better epigenetic markers of aging in the twins put on a vegan diet. So we have quite a few scientific supporting points for vegans being healthier on average. And that specifically the person who is thinking about going vegan by increasing their fiber intake and their antioxidant intake, didn't even mention that. Now that's going to end up lowering their calorie intake, their oxidative stress level, and put them at a lower risk of diseases based off the literature. Now I want to double back to the ethical stuff for a second here for a secondary point, and that is that I was amazed that he actually said this about harvest deaths, which is a point I've been hammering home for 10 years now, and no one was listening, I thought.
Humans consume the animals that also consume the grains, so you're consuming double the grains in some effect, even much more than that, because over its lifespan, the cow eats way more grain than you will ever eat. And so all that taken together, it's really good to be a vegan. Vegans get my utmost mad love and respect.
Yes, when you are afraid of causing harvest deaths, which I don't think the average meat eater is as concerned as they pretend to be, then if you are eating animals, you're also responsible for the harvest deaths of the grain that fed those animals. So you've got not just the animal death, but also all of the plant-based farming related deaths behind that animal on your plate.
I think once lab-grown meat becomes a possibility here in the next, I don't know how many years, I'm sure it's shit switching. I absolutely have no intention of hurting anything ever. The idea that animals have to suffer for my ass to eat a fucking food that feels nice to me in my mouth is dog shit.
And I am overdubbing this, but I was also really happy to see him support cultured meat. Most people are saying, oh, it's gross, but those people haven't been to a slaughterhouse.
That would be great if more people were vegan. Do it smart so that you don't have to come back and say veganism doesn't work.
So yeah, I fully agree with him, and this is why I have this channel, is to help people be smart on a vegan diet, to learn more about science. And yeah, I also wanted to respond to this, even though I'm nitpicking a little bit, just because it is a larger YouTuber who is not vegan actually saying something positive about a vegan diet. Saying it's really good to be vegan is something I just, haven't heard in years. So, and in terms of Maddie Limburner, she was not really that much of a topic of my video, but I do think it's great that she gets people to exercise, even if they might not end up looking exactly like her. If you can get somebody on a mat that would otherwise not be on a mat moving around, I think that's a win. I do think it'd be cool if she tried a vegan diet again. Probably not. She's probably not going to, because people who are ex-vegan have a super low chance of going back. But she is at least eating a more flexitarian style diet. That might be a good term for this. Still eating a lot of whole plant foods, but including animal products, so clearly not vegan. And at this point, seeming to perhaps deliberately not share what she eats, probably because it is such a volatile topic. Anyway, in the end, I think that this Dr. Mike, there are 2 Dr. Mikes out there on YouTube, saying that a vegan diet is good was refreshing. I have little nitpicking points with him. Like, again, I do think that vegans are healthier on average, and I do believe that the research shows that from the epidemiology as well as from some randomized controlled trials. But then in terms of vegan versus plant-based, it's quite obvious that a vegan diet is an ethical stance. And so when we're just talking about going on a fully plant-based diet, which a lot of people will want to do just to remove animal fat and things like that. Anyway, let me know down below what you think about all of this. Were there any other points in this video, perhaps, that I should have responded to? Because he talked for a solid 12 minutes about vegan stuff. So that's about as much as I can cover in a video. But yeah, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
And if you're vegan and you're goth and you have colored hair, I'm married. But if I wasn't, what's up?